Hello, lover. You've just entered a portal of pleasure, power, and deep, unapologetic sensuality. This is Talk Tantra to Me, where we liberate your authentic self, reclaim the wisdom of the body, and let pleasure lead the way. I'm your guide, Leola, tantrika, pleasure priestess, best-selling author of Sacred Sex Ed, and devoted student of the erotic mysteries. I'm here to strip away shame and awaken your most radiant, sacred, and sensual self. Get in, babe. We're conspiring for your most pleasurable life and seducing the world into a greater good. So, take a deep breath with a vocal exhale, relax that delicious body of yours, and let's talk Tantra. All right, babe, let's talk about your pleasure power. You know you're meant to experience more ecstasy, more ease, more turn on in your body and in life. But where is your hidden block? What's keeping you from fully owning or receiving even more pleasure in this delicious life? I've created a free pleasure power quiz to help you uncover your unique pleasure archetype and pinpoint exactly where your growth edge is. Also, when you take the quiz, you'll get access to a juicy Tantra ritual, also free and tailored to your unique pleasure archetype. Also, don't miss the Sexual Shadow Work Workbook, your guide to clearing shame, activating your turn on, and stepping into your most radiant and embodied self. Also free. Find them both at www.talktantratome.com/free or get the link in the show notes. Life is about to get very juicy. Welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this divine knowledge to make its way into your ears and lifestyle. Today, I am so excited to have Kimi Inch here live with us. Kimi Inch is another amazing woman in the Austin community that is making this city so much sexier and more sacred. She is a somatic therapist, a professional dominatrix, and then what was the last piece?
I'm an intimacy coach.
Intimacy coach. Great. Yes. And many, many other things.
And I'm a motivational spanker also.
Bless. We have to get that in, motivational spanker. We should definitely talk about spanking as like a path to Kundalini awakening at some point. Just putting that little pin there.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I love Kimi's energy. I've heard so many amazing things about your work from so many people that I love and respect and cherish. And so it's such an honor to begin deepening with you. And I know we have like a few opportunities to collaborate coming up, but this is like the first thing. And so it feels really special to be able to share you with the listeners as well. And I'm also just gonna put a little teaser out there that Kimi Inch will also be guest teaching. Yes, she's going to be guest teaching in the Pleasure Priestess.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's going to be so juicy. And I know that you're going to bring like such an extra level of depth and practice to these women. So if you're interested in the Pleasure Priestess, the link is in the show notes and you'll be hearing more about it shortly as well. But with that being said, Kimi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. You know, it's such a treat that I get to talk about what I love and cherish the most, my life's work and passion. And it's, for me, all about really introducing people into what's possible in their erotic lives. I think a lot of people have initial knee-jerk reactions to the idea of kink, right? And a lot of people, what comes to mind are extremes, which tends to be focused around what you see in the media, for example. And it's not all whips and chains and like those extremes. It can actually be a beautiful practice ground for universal life themes like power and surrender and pleasure and pain and all of these things that we experience in everyday life, but we can eroticize those things and play with it. So I geek out on this stuff. I know you do as well. Yeah. I feel like it's like a tantrika and a dominatrix walk into a studio and they just like birth a lot of beautiful things together. So I'm excited for us to kind of explore this and get to the root of what's possible in these dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things that are coming to mind that I want to deepen in just based off of that first little monologue.
Please, yeah.
But I really would love to start with this idea of erotic leadership. I think that being a leader in the world is so powerful, to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Sure.
But what does that mean when you bring in eroticism? I'm super curious to hear kind of your definition.
Yeah, the terminology that most of us are used to are things like dominant and submissive and top and bottom. And those dynamics can be really rich and fulfilling, but it's also part of an old paradigm. And for me, using a broader term like leader and follower is a great encapsulation of what's actually happening in the play space, which is essentially moving energy between people. And what we're talking about when we talk about power dynamics is basically designs of energy. And when we kind of feel into the design of energy between leader and follower, which tends to focus more around collaboration and co-creation, that's very different than a dominant submissive, which tends to feel more hierarchical and power over as opposed to power with. So feeling into words like leader and follower, I like to define that, and this is something I've been doing for the last 15 years, is defining erotic leadership as someone who inspires, guides, and influences life force energy. Because erotic is, eros is the root word for erotic, and eros is all about life force energy. So to step into leadership is to know how to lead and guide and inspire and all of those things with that life force energy, while the follower is an expression and embodiment of life force energy.
Yeah.
So using the idea of how do we play with those energies is a way that I want to invite people into expanding beyond what they've heard and what they know. And how you lead and how you follow is also very specific to each person as well. And you can definitely get more nuance the more you sort of dial down into those aspects. But yeah, the spectrum between dominant and submissive isn't really actually true. Like there's not somebody that really holds all the power or somebody that holds all the responsibility. Like there are both responsible people are both responsible for how they show up in this space, and both can be masterful in their own way.
Yeah, I have found that there can really be this place where domination and devotion overlap. And I really resonate with what you had said about it being about life force energy moving and exchanging, and what a beautiful expression of what it is to be human, to allow that energy to move and to be able to share it intentionally. But to me, as someone that could be maybe in the more follower, I love both. Like I'm definitely a switch.
Same girl. I feel it. All the things, please.
And yeah, it can be like, so in Tantra, devotion isn't as much as like other, like many mainstream religions see devotion as a path to like worship an external deity, right? But whereas in Tantra, the devotion is about devotion to self, devotion to beloved, devotion to the experience of life. Devotion isn't something that you gear towards something outside of yourself that is more representative. It's found more in the body, right? And I find that conscious kink, BDSM is such a beautiful way to explore that, because there's like research that shows that we make over 30,000 decisions a day. And what happens when we don't, when someone holds that power for us, when someone makes some of or all of the decisions for us, we have this opportunity to go inward in a different way. We have this opportunity to explore our own subconscious. And that's where you have that like subspace that to me feels very similar to like a deep meditation or samadhi. So I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it can also be an ego death. Diving into power dynamics and exploring beyond what your maybe 9-to-5 life looks like, for example, and trying on different archetypes and trying on different styles of showing up can be a huge ego death for people, to say that I'm going to surrender all that I know and be in the flow of whatever is is here, whatever shows up. But
Yeah.
what people don't tend to understand is that the dom or the leader also needs to be in deep surrender as well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just go in one direction. I see a lot of novice doms get into the habit of just focusing their energy towards another person. Like, I'm going to spank you. I'm going to tie you up. I'm going to talk dirty to you. I'm going to do you, like, and it's in this one way direction. And actually what really, fuels an experience is when both people are receiving and both people are giving simultaneously. That's why leader and follower is so important. When you look at partner dancing, for example,
Yeah.
even though there's a clear leader who's moving the direction, you can see how the follower can bring in their elements of mastery that heightens the experience. And without that mastery, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't actually read and come across the same way. So, being the follower is far from passive. It's far from, just being told what to do. It's also like you can be the muse in the dynamic. Like, how do you inspire the movement forward of energy? I always say that leader and follower can also be replaced with artist and muse, for example.
Love that.
And, when we think about things, like, I like to joke and tell people, feel free to call me daddy instead of mistress, because that's a different archetype. There's a different energy between someone who's a daddy versus someone who's a mistress, which is different than someone who's a pleasure dom or a sensual dom. And there's all of these nuances. So introducing people to expand beyond what they tend to conjure up in their minds when they think of kink, which is like a harsh leather-clad bitch with a whip, or a man devoid of emotion who's just telling someone what to do and just using another person. Like, it's so much more complex, and there's so many ways of playing with that energy, essentially, that could be really true and authentic to those people in the room.
Yeah, I really resonate with this realization that kink, BDSM, power play is so much more than the one or two, maybe three, like, different dynamics that we see in media, right? I had this realization, I started my career doing a lot of tantric body work and realizing, wow, I'm actually a dom right now. I'm a dom. I am holding the container, holding the space for my client, for them to follow into themselves almost in a way.
Right.
And I think that one thing that came forth when you were speaking that I'd like to go deeper on is this attunement, like this idea of, as someone that might be submitting or might be following, the attunement that one must have with themselves, right? And the sovereignty that's required as well. You can only trust your leader as much as you trust yourself.
100%.
And then also the attunement of a dominant or of a leader, what is required there, because I think that to me the best dominants are really in devotion to a greater good for all, not just to themselves to get the experience that they're craving, or even they're submissive, right?
Correct.
So I'm curious, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, because you're really playing small if you think it's just about, taking or getting your needs met on some way, on some level. And the way somebody is truly trusting of themselves and whatever shows up is going to be directly related to how much they can surrender. Like, I worked with this couple who had been together for 20 years, and they had a great relationship, but when they started to explore kink, it always ended in rupture, and there was like difficulty and conflict, and they did not know like what is going on. So they came to see me, and we started working together. And at one point, after a lot of conversation, we had an agreement that we would go into a scene together and do a conscious kink journey, as I like to call them. And the wife, the woman, wanted to take on the follower or the sub position, while me and the husband were leading the experience. And it was going really well up until we started playing with impact play, with spanking, which is something she really desired. And we had her on a spanking bench, and the husband is spanking her. And she starts to interject. She's like, "Oh, can you slow down? This is going too fast." Or, "Oh, can you make it harder? Harder, please. It'd be really nice if you would pull my hair. I feel like if you could just call me a good girl while you do," and he's spanking, and I can see he's getting really frustrated.
Yeah.
And I ask him, like, "Hey, let's take a time out and check in with each other. Like, how do you feel this is going? What are you noticing in your body?" And he's like, I feel really frustrated because I feel like she says she wants me to take control and be in charge, but then she undermines my authority every time. And she obviously is not surrendering and not being a good submissive. And she's taking my power. And she's like, on the little cradle, and she's like, well, my voice matters. And how do you know if I don't say something? And what people don't understand is that when you're in an erotic encounter, for example, it's almost like a snapshot into the relationship. It's a snapshot into the relationship you have with your partner, the relationship you have to yourself, and the relationship you have to life. And so how we do one thing is how we do everything. So how do you do intimacy? How do you do play? How do you show up with your partner when things go absolutely sideways? Because I see a lot of doms get locked into an agenda. It's supposed to look like this. She's not submitting. She's not playing her part. That's going to throw me off, right? So I said to him, if you're carrying a belief that she's taking your power, you're already in your ego. And you can't be an Eros and ego at the same time. Why did you guys even want to do this? Like, what was the intention? Like, for her to just do as you told her to? Is that your intention? And he's like, no, I wanted to have pleasure and I wanted us to have a deeper relationship and have more intimacy. And I'm like, okay, so something's in the way. I see that's what you guys want. That's what you're saying you want, but this is what's in the way. And what I'm seeing is that you're giving your power away to her because your ego's gotten all ruffled and it's not exactly as you thought it was going to be. You just thought she was going to say, yes, sir, yes, master, yes, daddy, and just be a good girl. That's not what's here. So how do we work with what's actually showing up? Because that's leadership. That's erotic leadership. And there's so many ways that you can meet this. So what's another possibility? And he's like, I guess I could have called a timeout and just told her, this doesn't feel good. Let's talk about it. I'm like, yeah, that's true. You could have done that. Or maybe you could have said, hey, lift up your head and look me in the eyes. I want you to say all the things that you want to say. And I don't want you to stop until you're complete. And then when you're complete, you're going to take a deep breath. You're going to put your head down and you're going to let go. Do you understand? And she was like, whoa, what? And he was like, oh, I like that. And I'm like, yeah, this is creativity. What else is possible? And he's like, I guess I could have said, oh, you have a lot to say. Maybe I'll stick something in your mouth. Because on her little check sheet, she said she liked gags. She likes these sort of things. And she's like, oh, I like that too. Yeah. And I'm like, and maybe you could have said, I love your voice. Tell me more, until you wear the fuck out. And there's nothing left to say. And she's going to just let go because she feels like you're not shaken by how she's showing up. That you're really deeply connected and center and grounded in yourself, and you're holding the container for her to be wherever she is and however she's showing up. And then her nervous system is going to relax, And she was funny because she was like, yeah, see, this is what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, bitch, hold on hold on a second, girl. You are interesting because you are saying that you want these things, but you're really fighting him. And maybe there's a rupture in the relationship that we need to look at. Maybe there's a way you don't actually trust him or yourself. And maybe we need to play with those things, not with the goal of it, like, being ecstatic and reaching altered states of consciousness through subspace. Maybe it's like really repairing something and seeing him show up the way you need him to time and time again, so that you are having a different experience in your nervous system and you start to shift and rewire your brain to that fact, as opposed to holding the belief that he doesn't have you and you need to, take care of yourself, like whatever those things are. But it's all a snapshot. And if we can dive deeper beyond what's on the surface, we can really have an opportunity to understand ourselves and our partners better and our relationship to life better, and say, this could be different. I want it to be different, and I can have choice in how I move forward from this day forward.
I love that you brought this example. I love everything about it. I think that I relate to it. I can feel so many of the listeners relating to it. And even this week, kind of a similar concept came into one of my group coaching containers, and we talked about this. And I really loved, I love that statement, you can't be an Eros and ego at the same time. That is so beautifully put and so accurate. And what an incredible reflection for this man. What a powerful opportunity for him to step into his power from a really integral place. I adore that. I want to talk more about the the woman's experience, because it's something that I've related to too, you know, being someone that knows what I like, knows what I want, powerful boss babe, also very sexually expressed and coach people on their sexuality. So what happens when I go into an erotic situation and I'm not getting exactly what I want or feel? And there have been moments where I found myself trying to like backseat drive the situation.
Do you get bratty?
I do. My husband actually,
I love a good brat.
I love a good brat too. My husband he mostly hates it, but every once in a while he like loves it, and so I relish in those moments. But I've in the past relationships been very vocal about what I want and what I don't want. And I think that there is this higher level, there's this, not higher level, there's another playing field in which you get curious about what are the sensations I'm feeling in this moment, and how could I actually just be with them instead of trying to make it something else, and what's available there. So for example, one time my husband was making love to me from behind, and I'm like touching my clit, and I'm like trying to like get it all working with the position. And like he grabs my hand and takes it away, and I was like, oh, that's kind of hot, I'm gonna go back again. And then he brings it away again, and he's like, nope, you are just gonna feel me inside of you right now, and just surrender and feel that. And beautiful. I remember being like I want to do it this way because this is what's gonna give me pleasure. But then I trust him. Yeah. And so I thought, you know what? Maybe he's onto something here. So I just let it be. And it was so delicious. Wow. It was so erotic. It was so powerful. Like the pleasure that I was feeling inside, I just felt so much more sensitive inside because I wasn't, you know, focusing on the hypersensitive clit, right?
Totally.
And so there is this opportunity of like, can I trust my partner? Can I get curious about what is instead of trying to micromanage it?
I think that what makes the difference of that, and you tell me, is like his level of attunement. You know, he might have had a different idea, but he sounds like he was still attuned to you. And that shows up differently. It could be a little frustrating around like, oh, I want to come and play with myself. But if you feel it's attuned and not misattuned, it's not misaligned, and you let yourself relax into it, then you could really surprise yourself. You know, what happens in a lot of these spaces is that a lot of men especially are not as attuned because they didn't grow up needing to be as much as women needed to be. Let me just say that. I'm not saying men aren't attuned. So there's a lack of practice for them. And I think conscious kink and devotional kink and these things give a lot of opportunity to understand what attunement looks like, because communication doesn't mean shit at the end of the day. Sorry, I might get canceled for saying that.
No,
but
I
it's
agree.
True. Like it doesn't take you all the way. And just because you're in an erotic setting and someone had said yes previously, or even says yes in that moment, if you're not attuned to them and what's really showing up in the space, it can go sideways, because erotic spaces are the most messiest, chaotic spaces that are available to us. And what might be good one day could be a disaster the next, and what could be amazing in one moment could be disaster in the next. There are so many things that come into play around trauma and being vulnerable in the most vulnerable state we can possibly be in. So without attunement and being able to flow with whatever is true and showing up in that moment, it can be really tough, and it could be a struggle, and that's what wears people out. And then they get like, it's been a long work week, I don't feel like doming my partner, it's going to be exhausting, and vice versa. Like I don't feel like I want to go into this because it feels complicated and it feels intense, and it doesn't have to feel like that. It can really feel like graceful, easeful, and just beautiful when we're able to really attune to what's real and what's really showing up in the moment.
Yeah, I want to just put an exclamation point on that. Communication is bullshit. I would say like verbal.
Yay! Finally, someone who gets it.
I would say verbal communication is like level 0,
100%.
Right? Like it's important, it's valuable. I think that honestly, especially for women, it's edgy.
Yeah.
But I think that the next level is, you know, understanding people's nervous systems, being able to trust your own read of a situation. I think that so much of the Me Too movement was because of a lack of attunement, not because, you know, all of these people are rapists. And I also like, I was sexually assaulted. Like, I think that that's very much a thing. And I think that so much of so many of those experiences could have been corrected with that attunement. And attunement is difficult, I think, especially for men, because so many men are ruled by their sexuality rather than ruling their sexuality. They're letting their orgasm have them rather than having their orgasm, right? And I think that's like such level one for men and for women. But, you know, especially for men. And I've said it on previous podcasts. I had Andrew on the podcast, my husband, a few weeks ago. Cool. And one of my favorite, like the thing that I love about him the most sexually is his attunement. And I love the way, the path, the possibility of using conscious kink as a way to become attuned, because I think it's just one of those practices that moves at a certain pace and has a certain level of reverence that you do get to be more mindful in those ways. And I'll just add one last thing about attunement to yourself as well as trusting yourself in those situations for women that are listening. One of the women in one of my containers this week had said, you know, I'm balancing this feeling of not liking what my partner is doing and sometimes even having a little bit of pain with certain types of penetration, and like knowing how to balance when I surrender to him, when I trust, when I lean in, and when I say something. And one thing that I had offered to her as well is, yeah, obviously if you're in pain, you might want to say something. But another thing that you can do is get attuned to yourself. Take a deep breath. Are you tensing your pussy and not realizing it? Like that's a huge thing for me. If I notice that I'm having pain during penetration, it's like, let me take a deep breath in. And on my exhale, relax. And I would say at least 75% of the time that reduces or completely eliminates whatever pain or discomfort I was feeling.
I love that so much. And I also, I believe the biggest killer of orgasms is actually being polite. Politeness
I love that.
is a killer of eros and orgasm. And women are very, very polite in the bedroom. And I almost get curious around, yes, the breathing and the attuning to self and really feeling the body, so important. And then maybe even enlisting your partner and saying like, something's showing up in my body and I want to actually express it. Like I actually want, instead of being like, I want to be like, and like maybe something needs to move. Yeah. Are you available for that? And, you know, a good leader will be like, fucking bring it on, because we know that we can trust whatever's showing up is doing it for, to be in service to us and our growth and our expansion. So that is also another possibility of like, if something is not feeling good, then how do we actually express that in a more primal animalistic sense and not like in a blaming or shaming kind of way? Yeah. But how do we let it move in our bodies? And like, let's be in the messy of the shit. Like, let's not be so fucking sexy and polite and perfect all the fucking time. That shit is a killer of eros as well. Like, be a mess, be an animal, be in the moment. And it usually will take you to such incredible places when you get that, when you are able to go through it, you know?
Mic drop. That was amazing. This woman is speaking my language.
I love it. We're kindred spirits. I know this already.
We sure are. Yes. Yeah, I think it can be really challenging for people in general just to make sounds, make noises, express themselves, right? Like one of the first things that I feel I need to teach people when they come into my spaces is how to breathe and how to make noise when they breathe.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Get comfortable with it.
It's hard, right?
It's so hard. The conditioning. Yeah.
Wait, are you? Yeah, exactly.
I see you, sister, already so spiritual, deeply devoted to your path, but something in you knows there's more. You've meditated, manifested, maybe even danced under the full moon, but have you fully felt the power of your unapologetic pleasure and sensuality? Have you allowed your body to become your greatest teacher? Have you stepped into leadership in love? The Pleasure Priestess Initiation is your next step. A full year of deep sisterhood where we do life and love together. Online, in ritual, month after month, and in the flesh for a juicy in-person immersion. We'll explore powerful Tantra practices that you can take home and adapt, whether for your beloved, your sisters, or even for your own community. Plus, we'll have amazing guest sexperts, medicine women, and other powerful priestesses already walking the path, coming to share their expertise with you. as well as group masterminds, an electric WhatsApp chat, and high-level support as you step into your fullest expression. The initiation is open for enrollment now to start at the end of April. But as soon as you join, you get access to a vault of over 40 hours of other tantric trainings and resources. This is more than a program, it's an initiation into your power, into your pleasure, into the woman you know you came here to be. Are you ready to awaken the pleasure priestess within? Click the link in the show notes to claim your seat in the temple.
I'm a very vocal, love maker.
Your neighbors must love you.
Yeah, I am. And like the joke is too, my husband and I both do it. Yesterday I was sucking his cock and I started to growl while I was doing it. And he's like laughing, but he's getting harder at the same time. I think that that's the piece too, is that it's kind of goes back to our past point on the ego, right? And so sometimes I think that we can take the noises personally, but I feel that a true leader knows that this is in service of the highest in the container, that expression, that movement of energy. Like, that's why we're doing this. We don't just want to have sex that feels good. We want to have sex and intimacy that restores our life force, that transforms us, that makes us see the world in a different way. And that's what happens when you surrender to that real, messy, dark, divine, running through.
So true. And I love that you talk about attunement to self as opposed to just attunement to other. That's so important. You know, I've been attending and holding play parties for over 23 years and I've been to thousands and thousands of them. And I notice time and time again, it tends to feel like when a man and woman are exploring the possibility of creating an erotic experience together, that the man is really attuned to what he wants and what he's excited to explore, but he's not as attuned to her. And then I see the vice versa with the woman. She is very attuned to him and his needs and what he wants, but she's not attuned to hers at all. And mastery is about holding both. It's about holding the me and we simultaneously while using discernment to honor both. And that's how I define attunement. And it can feel like a fucking superpower to people, but it's not. It's our intuition, our presence, and our commitment and devotion to the moment. And while it might feel like someone's reading your mind, it's just that they're just really attuned to themselves first and then the environment and to their partners. And I think that is number one, if you want to be an amazing lover and play partner, that attunement is the first line to really look at in your life.
I totally agree. I resonate with everything you said. I just had something I wanted to say, and now it left my brain. I hate when that happens. Okay, well, maybe it'll come back. I do want to talk a bit about, let me just see if it'll come back for a second. No, it doesn't. Okay, let's talk a little bit about ritual, like how you incorporate ritual into BDSM and maybe like a level of like sacredness or reverence, because I think that that's something where BDSM and kink to me can really overlap.
Totally.
And it can look very different as well. So I'm just curious what you would add to that.
Yeah, you know, when people ask me what is the difference between kink and conscious kink, I say, well, consciousness is part of it, right? That's already in the title, but it's also intention and embodiment. And so how do we decide what's sacred? There's intention, embodiment, and consciousness around it, but it's also choice. Like, I choose for this to be sacred. I decided it's sacred because that's how I'm going to hold it. So when we're thinking about maybe planning or experimenting in an erotic experience, we can think about like, well, what level of intention do I want to bring into this experience? Because it can be a slap and a tickle. It can be all about pleasure and orgasm, or it can be shadow work, or it can be about looking at places that are not conscious for me, or what's in the way of what I desire, and eroticizing those things. Like, I can really play with these elements and bring a level of mindfulness to not just what we're doing in the room, but how the room looks, how it feels, what's music's playing, what's the scent in the air, what does the ambiance look like? Not to like be tied into in an aesthetic as a way to hold me back, but to again bring more reverence and specialness into the experience. So approaching that, like most people, when they experiment with kink, they're already fucking. Like, you know, they're already in doggy and the guy's like, who's your daddy? You know, and the girl's like, oh, I'm getting spanked, you know, or the guy's fucking the girl and she's like, choke me, daddy, slap me in the face. Like, that's like, and that's hot. Like, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with that. That just wouldn't really be considered conscious and devotional sacred kink because there hasn't been like a depth brought into the experience. And while everything has value, being able to sit with somebody and sit with yourself and say, like, what do I want to create?
Yeah.
What do I really want to create? Because sky's the limit. And then we have an availability for Eros to be our drug and to bring us into these altered states of consciousness that mimic medicine journeys of all types, so that we're actually in an expanded state where it's, you know, interrupting our patterns and bringing us into unconditional love and possibility, where I can actually look at my life and start to feel in my body, have a bodily visceral experience of maybe something that challenges my belief systems or challenges the way that I move through the world. So when we bring this all into the forefront, oh my gosh, there's unlimited potential of what you can create with your partner. Like, let's manifest, let's heal, let's empower each other. Because empowerment and healing can look all types of ways. You can be in, you know, cognitive therapy for 20 years and heal, but I think it's way more fun when you're having orgasms and ecstasy when you're healing at the same time, right? So, and you can actually have a healing experience in one erotic experience, like in one encounter that actually changes the fabric of your existence, where you really, like, I had an experience that completely shatters what I was carrying with me through the conditioning and programming, and now I'm actually feeling like I'm a liberated person who's moving with wholeness and not with illusion. The thing that people get caught up in that I want to just bring in is this idea of fantasy, for example. And I studied Tantra for 15, 20 years. And Tantra has a lot to say about fantasy, actually. And it has a lot to warn around being in what's not real, for example. So the idea of using fantasy in play is like to go deeper. Like, so one of the biggest fantasies for people is to have more than one partner at a time. Yeah. A lot of men want to have threesomes with two women, right? And all of these scenarios, but nobody really stops to wonder why. Like, what is that about having more feminine energy in the space that feels like it's really meeting a need of mine? Is there a way that it's meeting a need that I had when I was a child and I've eroticized it somehow? Yeah. Is there a possibility that, you know, this fantasy of, like, you know, meeting a stranger and having them just like kidnap me and take me to their lair and do whatever they want to my body is just this desire to really let go and just to be in the moment because I'm so in my fucking head all the time. Yeah. And so the invitation is like looking at our fantasies and desires, getting curious about it, and seeing how can it catapult us into a deeper truth of who we are and what's showing up in our lives. So that, again, we can have choice and we could play with it instead of just saying that we're victims to it and just saying it has to be this way. Like, how do I get to play with everything that I do? Like, I'm a fucking pervert. I am such a pervert. And I don't mean that just in the bedroom. I look at all like situations in my life and I pervert them somehow. I kinkify everything. You know, if I'm having a shitty day because my best friend's a pain in the ass and I'm like, oh, well, I can be such a masochist sometimes and maybe she's being a sadist. You know, there could be an existentialness kink around playing with these dynamics and like saying like, I don't want to keep it just to the playroom, babe. You know, I want to kinkify my whole life. I want to pervert my whole life because I think it's so much more fun to look at life that way as opposed to just keeping it in one area.
It is fun. It's almost like a cosmic joke, but sexy. I remembered the thing that I was going to say earlier, and it kind of ties in with all of this.
Fantastic.
So it's perfect. But I do agree that Tantra and BDSM have this shared intention vibe, right? And I think, you know, I'm not sure if it's true in BDSM, but in Tantra, it's definitely like have the intention, but be open to whatever magic wants to flow through. And I think that that's kind of what you were speaking to about being curious about why your desires are there or what they might feel like once they're actually fulfilled. And like, because there's so many fantasies that I think about that I don't actually want to happen, but the idea, right? And like, why is that there? The curiosity. But specifically when you spoke to being attuned to yourself and being attuned to your own desires and how that can be challenging for women, that's something that I have resonated with. There was one point where I realized I'd been in enough play parties and I realized, wow, I have this pattern where I try to fit into other people's fantasies. I don't really get I was like, I'm not getting curious about what my own are and why is that? And what it came down to for me was realizing first of all, it's safer because I don't have to be vulnerable to share my desires. Second of all, I get validated. I get I get approval vibes from the people that want their fantasies fulfilled. And then I am loved and I am respected and I am put on a pedestal, which my ego loves.
Yes.
And seeing, wow, actually, what if getting what I want and like asking for it is the ego death, which is crazy because most people think that wanting something would be associated with the ego. But for me, it was my attachment to fulfilling someone else's fantasy. And I found that a lot of women resonate with that I fit into other people's fantasy rather than finding my own and claiming it.
That's so interesting because that shapeshifter energy is like such an interesting archetype, and there's, you know, light and shadow to all archetypes.
Absolutely.
And so there is like an idea of being able to be adaptable and show up with whatever is in the space, but also like, am I giving myself away? Am I actually being authentic in this moment? Or is the intention for a validation? And you know, intention is a big foundation of how we move. So getting really clear on that, because you could have fun with like wanting validation. Like you can definitely like play into the like, you know, like just praise the fuck out of me, and really like bring that into consciousness and see like what feels more fulfilling and sustainable in my body when I actually bring it to consciousness. So that sounds really profound, and it's so beautiful that you could actually recognize like what is ego and what's actually your authenticity and realness.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite things now is like helping women find, what do you actually want? Because again, I think women too are so often conditioned to go with the flow and to not rock the boat and to keep the peace. And I think that's another way that I was just falling prey to society. But now I get to be the conscious creator, the erotic leader.
Yes. Well, that's cool because I'm actually in my slut phase right now. I'm in a sacred slut phase. I have been in the dom role for a really long time, again, 23 years. And I've also definitely played in being submissive and the follower, of course, but I've really started come to this place in my life where I want to welcome all experiences. And just like we kind of said, fuck communication, I'm in a place in my journey where I'm not needing the like in-depth consent conversations right now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I am so aligned and in tune with myself that I know that whatever shows up in my field is actually supposed to be for me, and I won't attract anything that actually isn't for me. So I don't actually need to go into what I am and am not okay with. Like instead, like let's go into the murky darkness and like let's see what shows up in the moment. And what that's looked like is invitations for erotic expansion and exploration and fucking and pleasure and, you know, multiple people and all of that. And it's, I feel like a place of my evolution to let go of control and again, what it's supposed to look like and really trust myself and trust the universe. And it has been such a juicy, delicious gift. And it's been so revitalizing and fulfilling. And I don't think I could have achieved that in my 20s and 30s. Yeah. I just wasn't there yet. And so, and so you kind of start to notice your own evolution within your work, right? And within your play. And you start to notice like, oh, maybe the fantasies that I used to have aren't as exciting to me. And now this is interesting to me. And now that's interesting to me. And it's just part of like our path, really. And I love, again, to be on path because my eroticism and my sexuality is my spiritual practice. And I bet you can relate to that. Would you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A million %.
This is definitely our spiritual practice. And this is our way of communing with God.
Bless. I'm so happy to be here, finding God in the body. You know?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I could cry just thinking about it. And I just want other people to experience that, you know? To be able to come back to their core essence and that sense of wholeness and trust where they can really feel like their sexuality is not just a cheap thrill or just a way to scratch an itch, that it can actually be a doorway that can only be locked from the inside out, you know, or unlocked from the inside out. And instead of using sexuality like people use fast food just to quench a hunger or a thirst, like it can actually be so much more.
It's so true. I mean, this is the energy that literally made us, how could it not be the most sacred path?
Right.
And that's, you know, my take, which might be blasphemous, but I feel like you resonate.
Yeah, good.
I also loved what you were sharing, that you're kind of in this slut phase and this piece around consent's coming up, and maybe even not needing as much consent or at all.
Yes.
I have a friend who says, she's like, I don't do consent conversations. I just don't do it at all. I trust that I'm going to put myself around people that I trust with my body, and I trust myself to speak up if I need to speak up.
100%.
And I think that that's a really beautiful, radical, empowered, almost like a mastery level concept. You know, it's really radical today to kind of say that and to own it.
We could get in so much trouble just talking about this.
It's
you know
true.
that, right?
Yeah.
And with cancel culture and all, and the confusion around it because of there being so many ruptures and issues around consent because of a lack of attunement, not because of a lack of consent or communication, but a lack of attunement. And that's where I think education and practice needs to be focused around. But you know, I have a kink checklist, and we go through this list around yeses and nos and maybes, and it's a really good starter tool. Like, it really is, because people don't always know what they want, and they aren't really clear on that. So these are stepping stones, though. We build a foundation not to leave a foundation empty. We want to build shit on top of the foundation, right? We want to build our castle, our mansion, our whatever our dream and vision is for what's on top of the foundation. People get really stuck in building foundation and staying there.
Yeah.
They don't go anywhere from that place.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like you can get consent fatigue. Like, stop asking me. Like, trust that I'm in a place in my education and in my training where I will let you know if something's not working. I am clear on that. And if anything, you know, we'll learn about the oopsies and ouchies as we go along. I don't actually want to try to do it perfectly or steer away from those opportunities, because I think that can only create more depth and intimacy. And that's what my intention is to doing this experience. But yeah, people get really caught up in like, this is my boundaries, this is what I don't want. And there's a sense of protection there. And I get it. You know, maybe something happened where we feel like we do need to self-protect. But when you're able to like let that go and know that there is nothing to protect from, and you know that if you're with an energy in a man or a woman where you're like, it's not a fuck yes in here, like, it doesn't feel like they know how to meet me, and I don't want to go down this road with them, then you're going to just move away from that, you know, at the end of the day. But unfortunately, you know, that's not 101 stuff, right? It's not beginner stuff, and that takes time and healing and integration in order to get there. But yeah, when you get to a certain point, all of those frameworks and structures go out the fucking window. And then you really get to open up to what's chaotic and magical and infinite, which is what's possible once you get there.
Yeah. Just to reiterate that, I do think that it is important to have these skills to communicate. But once you get to a level of, I am.
Do you and your husband before every time have like a conversation
No.
or like, I'm the, you know, like.
Yeah. And like, there's also been moments where I didn't feel like there have been moments earlier in our relationship, especially, where I noticed myself go into a freeze response and not communicate a thing until afterwards. And that actually ended up bringing us closer in the end, because then he started to see, oh, now I know this thing that I watch out for. This doesn't need to be a huge rupture for us. This gets to be an opportunity of, okay, I froze. I take responsibility for that. This was not, you know, existentially damaging to our relationship.
Right.
And you learned a piece about me. And so I do think that having the ability to be sovereign and communicate is, again, level 0, step 1, lock that in. But then there can be this next level in intimacy that awakens, where it's not so binary. It's not so this, that, consent, only if it's a
Black
fuck
and
yes.
white.
It becomes a little bit more of like a curiosity and opening. And that's really where you start to expand your comfort zone. And that's where you push your edges. And that's where the growth is. That's where a lot of the magic is. Yeah. And, you know, very often at those early layers, the growth edge is setting a boundary or saying what you want. And so it is also an attunement of, where are you in this journey as well.
I couldn't agree more. I love it. Yeah.
I had, there's another example that I'd like to share. Andrew and I were together for about a year, And I was traveling and he wanted to do phone sex. And I was like, I'm not feeling it at all. Like I was traveling all day. I actually ended up getting really sick like the next day. I had like food poisoning or something. And so anyways, I was a no. And, past iterations of myself, or even, I would maybe tell my clients, well, if it's a no, then maybe honor your body, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I felt in and I was like, you know what? I really want to be in devotion to my relationship right now. I'm curious to see if there's an opening. Let me just try it on. Let me just get naked, see what happens. And that's another piece too, that's like, it's another level. Like once you can trust yourself that you're going to honor your boundary, you're going to honor your body, then you can begin to explore with, even when I'm a no, can I find the yes? And it ended up being amazing. And like, I actually got into a place where I almost blocked him out and pretended he wasn't there and like covered up his part of the video and just like watched myself.
Cute.
And it was really amazing, actually.
It sounds like you were fuck yes to trying it on, and I'm sure that if it felt like a no the whole time, you wouldn't have endured and you wouldn't have just tolerated it, and you would have eventually come to a place like maybe this needs to shift. But yeah, I love like the staying curious and open and testing a little bit around, is this really true? Maybe there is a little door, or like a little crack in the thing that's open for me, and let's like follow the thread of that pleasure a little bit more.
I agree. Okay, I have one more little piece question, and then we'll wrap things up.
No!
I know! So good!
I'm having so much fun.
So I loved this piece. You didn't say this exactly, but my interpretation, a few questions ago, a few monologues ago, we were talking about this idea of like bringing the shadow out and like exploring the shadow, existential kink, right?
Yes.
And this idea of like making like, there are so many different lineages where we're really putting a spotlight on the shadow, and it's intense and it's gritty and it looks one way, but I think that there is also a way to make love to your shadows.
Totally.
And that can happen energetically, but it can also happen literally. Like you can literally do that, via conscious kink as well as Tantra. But I'm curious if you could speak into that and if you have any like examples or like breakthroughs for clients or otherwise that you can share as evidence.
Shadow is a part of who we are, and that's the issue isn't the shadow, it's when we disown it, right? And we don't allow an integration of shadow, and getting curious around, well, what does the shadow want us to know? Because there's a lot of juice there. There's a lot of wisdom there also, because shadow is different than ego, for example. Ego is mask, and ego is sort of meant to protect but keep you small. Shadow shadow's not that. So getting curious around like, what is the sacred message in the shadow? And how do we not only listen, but how do we actually bring it to the forefront? Again, how do we eroticize everything? Because you're right, we can fuck the shit out of everything. We can kinkify everything. There's so much potential there. Again, what we decide is sacred is because we choose for it to be so. And this is no different. So I love being able to play with shadow and with the sort of disowned parts of ourselves, whether that's actually bringing it in, like, let me bring in my superior, above it all, godlike, I can't do wrong, and I'm better than everybody else attitude when I'm stepping into my domination. As long as I'm bringing that awareness to my partner and it doesn't disorient him, it's an opportunity of like, I can receive as the leader too. And I think a lot of leaders forget that. And they get drained because their energy is going in one direction. But my follower or my sub can actually be holding space for that to come through as well. Like, what does that tyrant dominatrix look like, who only cares about her own needs and herself? And can we play with that a little bit? Because it's there for a reason. There's a lot of pleasure in our disowned parts. So when we're able to like feel that and like move with that, it can have less charge and control of us because we're kind of like moving through it and past it and on the other side of it. So those are really cool questions to ask as you continue to play, is like, again, not just what do I want in my life, but what's in the way of what I want. Why don't I have $1 million in the bank? Why don't I have my life partner yet? Why don't I have the things I say that I want? What's going on there? Are there some shadows at play and belief systems at play that are keeping me stuck? And if so, then let's play with it and come around it, and like let's come all over it and its face and then you start to notice like, okay, like once we move the energy, because, whatever doesn't move, it stagnates. Like that's stagnation, whether you're, growing old or whether it's food in your body and you decide not to exercise. Stagnation, it causes psychosis and, ill health and all of these sort of things. There's no different. There's no different. Like we need to keep moving the energy in different ways. So how do we move that emotional energy, and how do we move, the energy of what's keeping us stuck and keeping us disconnected from our highest potential? And then we can really open up and have an experience that's embodied and play in that realm instead. So I think it's just so much fun to actually go beyond, I'm going to be a naughty schoolgirl and you're the teacher that tells me to stay after work, after class, and you're going to spank me. Like that's super fun. But instead, like as the leader, I say, I want to represent your higher self, and I want to remind you who the fuck you are. Yeah. And I'm actually going to punish you for all the times you're not true to yourself. Ooh, I'm actually going to punish you for all the times you don't remember you're an amazing gift in this world, and you hold yourself back from pleasure because you don't think you're enough, you don't think you're deserving, or you think you're too much. I'm going to punish you for that. And again, it's not coming from me, it's coming from your higher self. And then not only am I punishing you as I'm spanking your ass, I know that that's connected to your root chakra. And the root chakra is connected to wealth, home, family, safety, and security.
Yes.
So I want to open up that portal, that energy center, as I'm spanking you with my hand, which is an extension of my heart. And the idea of connection and of love, of course. And when we bring in those elements, we are not just doing an erotic punishment. There's a form of that, but we're also moving energy in the body. And we're also calling in a higher power and possibility into this space as well, which can be so juicy.
Oh my God, I'm so thrilled with all of that. I'm like, okay, I've got a new little fantasy I want to play out with a schoolgirl. I never thought of it that way. And I'm glad you brought the spanking in and the extension of the hand and the root and also the Kundalini rest at the spine, so that that can pull the energy right up to your head by having that type of impact. So really powerful.
I love it.
Oh my God, I don't want to end. But please let us know. So you mentioned you have a kinky checklist. What are the ways that people can get involved with you, your work, learn more?
Thank you. I have a free kink checklist that's available online. And, I do in-person events. We have something coming up in May called Tied and Teased, where we're going to be playing with the depths of bondage and impact play and sensation play. And really, I'm going to introduce my format for psychedelic spanking and how you can really drop people into altered states of consciousness through sensation and impact play. I hope you'll come. I would love to have you.
Oh my God. May is actually wide open for me. So
Yay, I'm like, good. I will tempt you as much as I can. But yeah, we're doing in person, and then we do online experiences. And yeah, just to follow me at Kimi Inch on Instagram, or my website's andmorepresents.com.
And we'll have all this linked in the show notes.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And obviously, Kimi will also be teaching in the Pleasure Priestess. Yes. So excited for the ladies for that.
Same.
Thank you again so much. This conversation was
Thank you.
So juicy. And thank you to the listener for opening yourself up to this erotic leadership, this opportunity for you. Have a sexy and spiritual day, and I'll catch you next time on Talk Tantra to Me. Ta-ta.
Over the years, I've been approached by many pleasure-based companies to promote their products, but I've only ever said yes to one person because I genuinely love these products so much, as well as the woman behind them. Wands, spelled Waands, is a crystal pleasure toy company, and they have been a part of my Tantra journey since the beginning. And they're not just toys, they're truly activators and beautiful sacred pieces of art that foster deep self-connection, pleasure, and transformation. These 100% pure crystal wands and yoni eggs help you unlock your body's wisdom, clear energy blockages, and amplify your pleasure, whether alone or with a partner. And it's not just about the products. For me, it's about the heart and the soul behind them. And the owner, Courtney, I absolutely adore her. She's been so generous to offer you, my beloved listeners, an exclusive 15% off with the code Leola, Leola. So if you're ready to honor your sacred sexuality and awaken your sensual energy, stepping into a pleasure-filled life, head to wands.com. Again, Waands 2 A's, and use code Leola for 15% off. And you can always find the link directly in the show notes. Trust me, you're going to thank me later.